Welcome to Marine Tech Talk, a podcast about how Teledyne Marine's innovative technologies are enabling scientific discoveries and commercial tasks in the world's oceans and waterways. On this episode, we speak with Timmy Gambin, a wreck diver, maritime archaeologist, and associate professor of maritime archaeology in the Department of Classics and Archaeology at the University of Malta. Through the use of state-of-the-art technologies, Professor Gambin has contributed to the discovery of more than 25 ancient shipwrecks in places such as Spain, Italy, Sicily, and Croatia. Timmy considers himself lucky to combine his passion for World War II history with archaeology, especially in the growing field of underwater aviation archaeology. So here's Professor Timmy Gambin with the host of Marine Tech Talk, Melissa Rossi.
Hi, Timmy. Thanks for joining me today on Marine Tech Talk.
Thanks for having me.
Can you give our listeners a little background on yourself and your program at the University of Malta?
Sure. I'm an associate professor specifically in maritime archaeology, and our program here at the university is actually quite broad. We run a master's program, a taught master's program in global maritime archaeology. Then we have a number of key projects, one of which is the excavation of the Phoenician shipwreck. We're the team that excavates at the deepest levels with divers. And another massive project of ours is the systematic mapping of the seabed around the Maltese Islands using side-scan sonar. We've got a number of other projects, but those are our two main projects.
And are you doing those predominantly with unmanned vehicles, or are you using other equipment for that?
We started this project about 15 years ago. We started with a towed system, so towing a side-scan sonar fish behind the vessel. We still have a full towed system, but there are disadvantages. You have to go deeper than a certain amount of meters. You need a giant winch with hundreds and hundreds of meters of steel cable. If the topography is challenging, then you can't work with the side scan. So we always dreamt of using an automated vehicle. And that dream initially became a reality when we started collaborating with a very good friend of mine and colleague from Harvey Mudd University. He was originally in Cal Poly in the United States. And we started using, he has an IVA, so it's a small AUV that has a side scan and can go down to 100 meters. So we started experimenting with that with some great results, So we didn't have the challenges that one has with the towed system. The problem with the IVA is its navigation. So between every line, it's got to surface, and it switches from one survey line to the other on the surface, which is fine if you're working in somewhere that doesn't have a lot of marine traffic. But when you're working off somewhere like Malta or let's say Sicily, which is which are predominantly tourist areas, or you're working in the approach to a harbour, for example, where large ships are coming in and out, and they're, to them you're just a speck on the radar, and the AUV is actually invisible. Then you need your AUV to stay on the seabed. So we did get some fantastic work done with the IVA, but we needed to look at two other things. One was deeper. We needed to go deeper than 100 meters because our towed system could reach 150, and we needed to go deeper than that. And we also needed something that was autonomous and would stay submerged for the entire mission.
How deep are you actually working, typically?
We have a strategy. We've developed a strategy together with the heritage managers of the island. We've divided the sea in our territorial waters in a number of zones. And Zone 4 is from 50 meters to the edge, to any depth in our territorial waters. Traditional scuba diving is down to 50 meters. So we assume that if there's anything 50 meters and shallower, then it's been discovered or it's covered by sand or seagrass. So we want to map the unknown. We want to map where most people haven't dived, and so we map everything from the 50-meter contour. And I think the deepest areas of our territorial waters are 1,200. But our new AUV, which is a Teledyne Gavia, is rated to 500 meters. So we work down to 500 meters.
When did you purchase the Gavia AUV?
It was purchased through a European funded project called Syntagram, and the university sort of manages and runs it. So it's been at us for a little bit over a year, okay, and we've used it extensively now. We've used it as part of this project, whereby quite literally we go out and scan blocks, areas of seabed. So we calculate that we cover between 5 and 6 square kilometers of seabed per day with the Gavia at a resolution that permits us to find objects that are as small as amphoras. Amphoras are these ancient clay jars which measure about 2.5 feet in height. So we can actually spot, so good is the resolution from this vehicle, that we can actually spot individual jars on the seabed. So we cover about 5 kilometers, 5 square kilometers, as I said, and we work blindly. So slowly, we're kind of filling in the blanks in our territorial borders. And depending on how much funding we have to rent a vessel, then we go out to sea and use the AUV.
So with the Gavia, so initially as you're looking for objects of interest, things that might be interesting to take a closer look to. And then are you going back, if you see an object of interest, to get more detail and more up close work? Or is the area that you're surveying at that distance enough to give you that detail initially?
That's actually a very, very good question. So let me rewind a bit. So the first phase is this broad survey. I mentioned the 5-6 square kilometers. Then we use a program called Sonar WizMap to process and analyze the data, and we come up with a target list. Now, generally, when we're surveying, we're just surveying. So what I mean is we'll spend 7 days, for example, going out and getting as much data as possible. The philosophy is quite simple. Sort of if the equipment's working, let's go out and crunch, and get as much ground as, and we'll start prioritizing. Okay, and the next phases are varied. It could be that we return with the AUV, switch to the super high resolution, which is 1,600 kilohertz, and get an incredibly high resolution sonar image of that shipwreck. We also have a multi-beam on our a small multi-beam on our AUV. We haven't started yet, but as of this year, we're starting to create. We hope to create 3D models of large shipwrecks that are at depth. For other shipwrecks, we either use a small ROV, we have a deep trekker that is good up to 300 meters, and we also have a dive team that specializes in underwater photogrammetry. So we have different options with regard to how to revisit the sites that we first discover, and one doesn't mutually exclude the other. Sometimes we can do it with an ROV and then go back with divers. Sometimes it's just going to be high resolution and super high resolution, so it can be a mix of different approaches.
I did read recently that you would use the Gavia. I know you've used it in a few projects, but specifically to find a famous sunken British sub called the HMS Edge. So I was wondering how you got interested in this particular wreck. Can you explain to us the discovery and how you came to find that?
It's actually quite an interesting story. So some time back, when we were still using our towed system, we discovered another British submarine in our waters, the HMS Olympus, which is actually the largest loss of life in Royal Navy submarine history. Some years after we went public with that, I was approached by the grandson of Commander Tompkinson, who was the actual commander of the submarine when she went down. And there's a bit of an underlying story, because somebody had claimed that they had discovered HMS Edge of Libya, which, if that was the case, then it would have kind of brought shame on the commander and the crew, because it means that he and his men disobeyed orders. The orders were clear. They had to leave Malta in HMS Edge and go to Alexandria in Egypt without stopping or deviating from the course. And there's no reason to believe why Commander Tompkinson would have disobeyed orders, because he was not only an exemplary commander, but one of the most successful in Mediterranean submarine warfare. So anyway, the grandson heard about our work, probably through because of the publicity that the discovery of Olympus gave us. He asked us whether we had surveyed in certain areas. He was collaborating with a maritime historian named Clayton Alexiadis from Canada. And to cut a long story short, they traveled to Malta. We looked at some of the data that we had, and it was quite clear that there were some gaps which needed to be looked at. So through joint research between the three of us, we came across the minefields that the Germans and Italians had laid outside the harbor. We designed a number of blocks, of survey blocks, and literally put the AUV down in these areas. And on day 4 or day 5, there she was in one of the blocks that matched the minefields, and there was HMS Edge. So again, first we saw her with 600 kilohertz, and then the images that went literally viral. The news agencies from all over the world picked the story up, and they were created by the 1,600 kilohertz from the Gavia.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. How long did that, from the time you started working with, I think you said the grandson, to finding discovery, how long did it take you to set up that research project?
About 3 years.
Okay, so that's a fair amount of time involved in trying to map out and locate a sunken vessel.
Well, the bulk of the time was actually, putting the funding together, getting an agreement together, and then finding a slot in each of, everyone has every one of us had a busy schedule, and finally everything lined up. The Gavia was good to go. We had a boat available for the project for a particular time, and from the first meeting to actually discovering the Edge, as I said, a good 3 years have passed.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. That's an amazing story, actually, that you were able to find it. And also the sort of side story about them originally claiming to have seen it or thought it was off the coast of Libya. So that apparently was dispelled right away.
It was dispelled. And besides, so finding it with the Gavia enabled us to go back with an ROV and film the submarine in a lot of detail. So we put together a package of information based on the sonar and based on some photographic and video evidence. We sent this to the Department of Defense of the United Kingdom, and they actually confirmed on the basis of our study that we had, it was absolutely certain that we were dealing with the HMS Edge, because there was no way that we wanted the families of those that lost loved ones on the Edge to be sort of taken for a ride another time. We wanted to be certain. We had planned a memorial now at the end of April to coincide with the date of the loss, which is like 26th April 1942. And there were over 80 family members that were planning to come over. This is how much it means. So despite this event more than half a century having passed, it still means a lot to the people that lost loved ones.
So, I mean, obviously, in light of our present condition around the world, that memorial isn't going to take place, at least not physically this year. Is there a plan for another memorial at another time?
It's being postponed. It's not being cancelled because there's a physical memorial which is going up on the basis of the discovery. So an actual memorial overlooking the horizon towards where the submarine was navigating. We're planning. My dive team is planning to place a memorial plaque on the wreck itself as well, and then obviously a memorial at sea, because the daughter of the commander is actually still alive. So it's the mother of the grandson who wrote a beautiful letter of thanks to me and the team. So it's incredible, you know. This woman, young, she was a baby at the time, you know, was brought up without a father, and her mother never remarried, you know. Fantastic love story as well, you know, and all on the basis of this shipwreck. So it's not just the science and the searching and the discovery, but there is this really deep human story, and not just the commander, but every single one of the men lost would have had this kind of human connection.
Yeah, and how nice that you were able to bring some closure for all of those families or the descendants of those families to understand what really happened with their loved ones that were on that vessel.
Yeah, it's actually it's one of the most satisfying parts of our work.
I can imagine it would be. When you're doing these missions, I am interested in what your students are doing. So are the students from the university participating in your research? And if so, how so?
They participate full on. So, for example, even in the search for the Edge, we had a roster whereby two would be assigned to be on board, and then, you know, some of them would be assigned for the afternoon for the data analysis, data processing. So. And then others were assigned to the ROV roster. So when we went out with the ROV, they were actually on board keeping logs and so on. So the simple answer is yes. And how? Because these are the future generations of explorers, of researchers, and the Gavia is very much used hands-on to teach these future generations how to use these technologies and how to map the oceans.
So what other projects are you working on now or planned for the near future?
Very, very good question. So we just launched the website of the Phoenician Shipwreck project. I'll share it with you, and through your blog and social media, you can share it with your listeners. But we're about to launch a virtual museum of underwater archaeology. And this is something that we've been working hard towards. The first sites that will be included were done by divers. So the 3D and all the photogrammetry was done by divers. With regard to the deeper wrecks, so we've got some huge wrecks in deep water. So there's no way that, I mean, there is a way, but it just doesn't make sense to risk divers staying down for so long and doing repeated dives to do the photogrammetry. So this is where we're going to start exploring, doing the 3D models using the Gavia. And then eventually the models will be adapted to be placed on the museum. So on the museum website. So the idea is that anybody who's interested in ocean exploration, maritime archaeology, technology, history in general, but anybody at any level. So if you have a basic user and they just want to click and watch a video or see historic photos, they can do that. If you've got a kind of advanced user who's got a virtual reality headset, they're actually going to be able to visit the site from the comfort of their living room. This is a first on such a scale. So that's one of the projects we're working on at the moment. And obviously that entails taking the AUV out, doing the multi-beam surveys and so on. We're going back to the Phoenician shipwreck. So that's something else that's on the burner. And then a number of targets that we looked at that we discovered last year with the Gavia, we're going to be looking at with a remote operated vehicle. And we're starting our survey season with the Gavia. So watch this space. You may even just invite me back to us what we discovered.
I'd love to. That sounds great. I'd love to have you back. That's great. I'm looking forward to the launch of your virtual museum. I think that'll be really interesting. I actually remember you talking about that maybe 2 years ago when we were we had Teledyne Marine Technology Workshop in Europe. 2 years ago, you came and presented at that time, and you were mentioning that. So I'm really happy to see this is coming to fruition and will be launched soon. Do you have a date for it?
I'm a glass half full guy. So this COVID situation is actually giving us a captive market. There is a hunger for this kind of information because people cannot go out to physical museums. So it's a great way of sharing sites. So we've accelerated the development of the site. We're going to start with slightly fewer wrecks, but no fewer than 10, which is already a big task to put online. And hopefully by late May, early June, we'll be good to go.
Great. Well, hopefully, once that gets launched, maybe I can come back and talk to you again, and we can talk about that as well as your recent discoveries.
It would be my pleasure, Melissa. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. We're looking forward to everything that you have to discover coming forward and to the launch of the new museum. Thank you so much today. Appreciate your time.
Thanks again. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Marine Tech Talk podcast. To learn more about Professor Gambin's work and some of the discoveries discussed in this episode, you can find helpful links in the show notes at teledynemarine.com/marine tech talk. If you have any questions or comments about this show, you can email host Melissa Rossi at marinetechtalk@teledyne.com. If you like this podcast, please make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're hearing this show. That way, you'll never miss an episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next time.